My name is Rafael, you're watching Rock and Roll Garage, and today I'm going to show you 10 bands that Phil Collins loves. Rock and Roll Garage had selected these 10 groups he praised over the years, and I'm going to show you what he said about each of these bands, okay? But first, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Well, let's start. The first one is the Beach Boys. Phil Collins is a huge fan of the Beach Boys and the legendary Brian Wilson, the late legendary, the mastermind behind some of their most praised and influential albums. The records were extremely important for Collins, and he told Ken Bruce in the BBC radio show Tracks of My Years in 2016 that Sail On Sailor was one of his favorite songs. He said, "One forgets about the Beach Boys sometimes. The amount of great songs that Brian Wilson wrote, you know? But this album, Holland, that this song comes from, has got a lot of good songs on it. It appeared when they were on Hip, you know?" That's what Phil Collins said, and that song was first released on the group's 19th studio album, Holland, in 1973. The song was composed by Brian Wilson, Tandy Elmer, and Van Dyke Perks, with lyrics by Ray Kennedy and Jack Reilly. However, who recorded the vocals for the track was Blondie Chaplin. Curiously, that song was the inspiration behind Genesis' Misunderstanding, as Collins already revealed. According to the musician, that song was based on Sail On Sailor. The track was part of the Genesis album Duke, released in 1980, and became a big hit. The second band, let's move to the second band, the Four Tops. He always had a really broad musical taste that was especially showed during his solo career. The musician mixed many of the Motown influences he had. The Four Tops was his favorite band from that era. That's what he said in an interview with Center Stage. He said, "Probably the Four Tops were my favorite from the Motown era, because they had, certainly in England, where I lived, they had just one hit after the other. They were just full of hooks, and you know, they're just great songs. Motown is the music I grew up with. I mean, as well as the Beatles, which of course everybody grew up with. For me, it was the Motown records that I really gravitated to. So for me, it's the soundtrack of my life. I've never sung these songs apart from the school band," he said. And Collins had the chance to write a song for the Four Tops in the 80s, which became a hit. Released in 1988, Loco in Acapulco was written by Collins and the producer Lemon Dozier, who was part of the Four Tops. It was part of the soundtrack of Buster, a movie starring Phil Collins and Julie Walters. In 2010, he also paid tribute to the group, covering some of their songs on his album Going Back. The tracks covered were Loving You Is Sweeter Than Ever, Standing in the Shadows of Love, and Something About You. Now we move to the next one, The Action, which is not a very known band, but it is Collins' favorite one. He revealed that they were the best of all time in his opinion. The last known band was formed in London, England in 1963 and was part of the mod subculture mixing pop and soul music. He praised them in an interview with Tracks of My Years. He said, "The Action, what can I say I haven't already said before? This is my favorite band, my favorite, absolute favorite. In the 60s, I was going to the Marquee Club and I discovered them one night. I went to see them every night they played. I've since got to know them, played with them where they reformed, and I played a gig with them at the 100 Club. It was a dream come true. You had to be on stage playing all the songs that I heard when I was a teenager, you know. Roger, the drummer, is a huge influence on me. We became great friends now. This is a great record. Never Ever." They were produced by George Martin. "It's a great song," Phil Collins said. And Collins also said that playing with The Action live felt like he was playing with the Beatles, because he was a huge fan of their music. Now we move to Tom Petty. That's right, Phil Collins was a Tom Petty fan. He is a Tom Petty's fan. And he revealed this also in an interview with Ken Bruce in the BBC radio show Tracks of My Years. He revealed that the song Learning to Fly was one of his favorites. And he said, "I've loved Tom Petty stuff for a long, long time. He's very cynical, which I kind of understand, you know. It's very English in some respects. I always loved his work with the Traveling Wilburys, but he has that 12-string thing. It's just that reminds me a little bit of the Byrds, I think, from the 60s. I just find him very edgy, keeps reinventing himself. Big fan. As Collins said, Tom Petty was a member of the Traveling Wilburys, which also had Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison, Jeff Lynne, and George Harrison. Now we move to Traffic. The band formed in Birmingham, England in 1967. Traffic is another band that Phil Collins loves. The group was originally formed by Steve Winwood, Jim Capaldi, Chris Wood, and Dave Mason. He praised the band in an interview back in 1986, and he said, yeah, Steve Winwood, I would like to work with him. I mean, I like him ever since Spencer Davis Group, and of course, Traffic. Traffic were one of my favorite bands. But he's got a great voice. I think it's ridiculous that not many people know him. I know that he's got a hit record, but up until then, it was like, oh, Steve, didn't he used to be with the Spencer Davis? No one ever heard of him since, really. I suppose Traffic was a really big band, but him, I like to work with him, and Aretha Franklin, I like to work with. Collins finally had the chance to play with Winwood 3 years later after that interview in 1989 when he played in the Hammond organ, when Steve Winwood played the Hammond organ in the track All of My Life, the song that was part of Collins' solo album, But Seriously. Now we move to Prince. Phil Collins is also a huge Prince fan. Like most rock stars from their era, they were impressed by Prince, and he praised the musician in an interview with David Sheff, and even revealed some of his favorite songs. He said, I'm a big fan. I just wish he weren't quite like he is sometimes. I mean, he came to some British awards here and made his way up to the stage to get his awards with a huge bodyguard who stood there while he said, thanks a lot. So I just think it's funny to pull that kind of thing off in this business. If you're in front of 10,000 kids screaming at you, it's one thing, but inside the business is strange. Musically, Prince is great though. I love his attitude. Little Red Corvette is a fantastic song. Take Me With You, Purple Rain. That's what Collins said, and curiously, Collins was accused of plagiarizing Prince. Later on, he admitted that he just took the tempo and locked into the drum machine of 1999. Which was a song that inspired Sussudio. And we move to a quite obvious one, the Beatles. Like 99% of the rock and roll musicians from his generation, Phil Collins was also influenced by a lot by the Beatles and loved them since day one. He told David Sheff that the Fab Four probably was the best band that ever existed. He said, when McCartney has balls, he's great. There was some talk of my producing him. I liked the idea. I thought just to get a bit of balls into the production. I'm sure he's got it in him. It's just that someone's not bringing it out. Everyone looks at McCartney and wants the Beatles, which is impossible. The Beatles were probably the best band ever. Now he wants to do what he wants to do. Unfortunately, that may not be what the public wants to hear from him. Curiously, Collins was an extra in the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night, released in 1964. However, he didn't make it to the big screen in the final cut. Still, he had the chance to meet Ringo, one of his favorite drummers, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. And he also took part in the recording sessions for George's All Things Must Pass, released in 1970, playing the conga. However, just like the movie, he didn't make it to the final cut. And now we move to Led Zeppelin, one of his favorite bands. Ringo Starr was one of his favorite inspirations, but John Bonham as well. The Genesis frontman had the chance to see Bonzo performing when he was still part of Tim Rose's band. He recalled that in an interview with BBC 6 Radio a couple of years ago. He said, I saw John Bonham play at the Marquee Club with Tim Rose, who was an American singer. He did this hit version of Morning Dew, and he was on tour and had this guy John Bonham on drums. I went to see Tim Rose, but when I saw Bonham, I had never seen anything like it. He had the best bass drum of anybody I've ever seen. I became a convert there, so I started to follow him wherever he was doing rude to be playing in a band. Next time I saw him as with Led Zeppelin, when they were still called the New Yardbirds. The early Led Zeppelin was something to behold because nobody was doing that. Decades later, he had the chance to perform with the surviving members of Led Zeppelin at Live Aid. However, he was criticized for his performance. Curiously, John's son, Jason Bonham, revealed a couple of years ago that his father was quite upset when he lost a poll to Collins back in the late 70s. And now we reach The Who. The Who is also one of Collins' favorite bands, and certainly the late legendary drummer Keith Moon was an important element of the band for him. He told BBC Six Radio that Won't Get Fooled Again is one of the greatest songs of all time. He said, I think that one of the classic rock tracks of all time is Won't Get Fooled Again. I remember seeing them on TV. They were televised from Charlton Football Ground. I saw him with this gaffer tape around his head, Keith Moon, with his headphones. You know, it hurts to take it off if you're foolish enough to put it around. The way he played, there was no orthodoxy at all. And he had the chance to see Keith Moon twice, but not really to speak with him. He said, I was probably underage, but I used to go there and Keith used to be sometimes behind the bar. I will never forget I bought a round of drinks which should have cost almost £1, which I know it sounds ridiculous now, but it was like 6 or 7 drinks. Should definitely have cost the best part of £1. He was giving me the drinks. He gave me 18 shillings change, and I always thought he was lovely after that. I asked Pete Townshend if I could join The Who after Keith died. I was doing a session with Pete Townshend. I said, you know, if you're looking after the dust settles, I would love to do it. But they already asked Kenny Jones. I would have left Genesis for that. And now the final one, which is Earth, Wind & Fire. That's right, he also likes disco music, and Earth, Wind & Fire is one of his favorite bands from that music genre. He praised the band in an interview with Rolling Stone, recalling his work with Philip Bailey, who was a member of the group. He co-wrote the hit Easy Lover with Collins in the 80s. I will always loved Earth, Wind & Fire. In 1984, I was asked if I would produce Philip Bailey's solo album. People were leaning on him racially. Don't come back with an Ide album. You're one of us. So Philip got Nathan East to play on it also. We hit some rocky ground early on, but we worked everything out. Near the end of the sessions, Philip said, we haven't written anything together on this album. So we just started having a jam one night and went round and round. It turned it into a verse and a chorus. We recorded that night so we wouldn't forget it. That song doesn't sound like any particular era. It's just fantastic. The hip hop brigade fell in love with me after Easy Lover. They were like, where'd that come from? That ain't black music and that ain't white music. That's kind of an interesting color of beige. That's what Phil Collins said. And these are some of his favorite bands of all time. If you want to read more, please go to the description and visit the article I wrote about it. You can find a lot of information there and hear all these bands. And let's talk about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your comment. Thank you for watching, and I see you later.